In the quiet expanse of a small military town, the late 1980s don't just echo with the sounds of disciplined marches and patriotic salutes. Here, beneath the serene facade of order and honor, lies a chilling narrative that shakes the very foundations of this close-knit community. Today, we peel back the veil on a case that intertwines the darkest of human emotions with the rigor of military precision, revealing a story of forbidden love, deception, and unspeakable tragedy. Our journey into this unsettling chapter begins with whispered rumors and fleeting shadows, crime scene photos flashing across the screen, each snapshot a haunting piece of a puzzle involving Captain Richard Delaney, a man revered by many as a pillar of strength and integrity. Yet alongside these images of a decorated soldier linger hushed voices speaking of a young woman, Tasha Lewis, whose sudden disappearance sends shockwaves through the heart of this conservative town. As we delve deeper, expect to traverse a twisting path lined with shocking revelations and moral dilemmas, a narrative forged in secrecy but demanding to be told. Through interviews, archival footage, and dramatic reconstructions, we aim to piece together the fragments of a shattered life and a concealed affair that culminates in a grisly crime, challenging everything this community stands for. This is not just a recount of events, it's an exploration of the human psyche under the pressures of fear, ambition, and illicit desire. Welcome to a true story that must be seen to be believed. In the heart of a military town cloaked in tradition and discipline, Captain Richard Delaney stands as a figure of exemplary service. To his peers and superiors, he embodies the values of the armed forces: strength, loyalty, and honor. Yet beneath this commendable veneer lies a starkly different truth. Richard harbors a hidden predatory instinct, cleverly masked by his charisma and authority. Enter Tasha Lewis, a young woman with dreams that stretch far beyond the confines of her small town. Fresh out of high school, her life is a canvas of possibilities, yet she is inexplicably drawn to the maturity and allure of Captain Delaney. Her youthful innocence and eagerness for life make her particularly vulnerable to the seasoned soldier. Their paths cross during a community event on the base, where Tasha volunteers to assist with setup, a gesture aimed at ingratiating herself with the military community she admires. Richard, ever the opportunist, notices her enthusiasm and beauty, seeing in her an easy target for his affections. The initial exchanges are seemingly innocent, an encouraging word here, a commendatory nod there, but with each interaction, the groundwork is laid for something far more complex and dangerous. As the weeks pass, the connection between Richard and Tasha deepens. Their meetings become more frequent and secretive, often under the guise of mentorship or casual encounters at local spots, known only to locals. Richard showers Tasha with attention and promises of support, suggesting he can help guide her future, perhaps with a career in the military or connections beyond the town. Tasha, enamored by the attention from such a respected figure, begins to see Richard as her pathway to a brighter, more exciting life. With every stolen moment, the relationship intensifies. Tasha, with her heart wide open, hangs on Richard's every word, believing his promises of a future together. She sees in him a figure of stability and accomplishment, attributes she longs for in her own life. Meanwhile, Richard carefully manages their encounters, ensuring they remain hidden from prying eyes, all while maintaining his esteemed position within the military and his own family life. Yet, as their affair gains momentum, the initial thrill gives way to an unsettling dynamic. Richard's assurances become less frequent, his demeanor more calculating. Tasha, still caught in the web of his initial charm, finds herself grappling with the growing realization that her dreams may indeed be just that, dreams, vulnerable to the harsh light of reality. As she navigates her deepening feelings, the stage is set for the harrowing events to follow, each step forward in their doomed relationship bringing them closer to a precipice neither fully comprehends. The turn of the season brings with it a revelation that forever alters the course of both Richard and Tasha's lives. Tasha discovers she is pregnant. Filled with a mix of youthful hope and naive excitement, she views the pregnancy as the beginning of a new chapter, a tangible symbol of her bond with Richard, and perhaps a sign that he would commit to the future he had painted in her mind. For Richard, however, the news strikes a chilling chord. The pregnancy is not a symbol of hope, but a looming threat to his carefully curated existence. It jeopardizes his reputation, his family, and his position within the military community. His response is swift and calculated, masked by a facade of concern for Tasha's well-being and their future together. Under the pretense of protecting Tasha and their unborn child from societal judgment and the potential backlash from his family and the military, Richard persuades her to keep the pregnancy secret. He suggests a safe and discreet solution, an illegal abortion performed away from the prying eyes of the town. Tasha, trusting Richard implicitly and overwhelmed by the gravity of her situation, reluctantly agrees, swayed by his assurances of safety and care. Richard arranges for the procedure at a clandestine clinic far from their town, ensuring no connections to his known life. His demeanor during the planning is one of urgency, hidden behind a veneer of support, pushing Tasha towards a decision that serves his needs more than hers. The day of the procedure arrives. It's carried out in a nondescript, isolated location where anonymity is promised to those desperate enough to seek its services. The lack of proper medical oversight and the hushed, hurried nature of the clinic contribute to a fatally flawed execution. As complications during the abortion arise, the unqualified staff find themselves ill-equipped to manage the situation. Tasha's condition rapidly deteriorates, and in the critical moments that follow, panic ensues. The procedure ends tragically with Tasha's death, her last moments marked by confusion and fear, far from the loving support she had imagined. Richard, who had waited outside under the pretense of discretion, is quickly informed of the tragic outcome. His initial reaction is not grief but cold, acute panic. The reality of his situation sets in. He could be charged with not only adultery, but also involvement in an illegal abortion, and now potentially manslaughter. The immediate aftermath is chaotic. Richard, driven by self-preservation, coerces the clinic staff into secrecy and hastily devises a plan to distance himself from the tragedy. He contemplates the disposal of evidence and the concoction of an alibi. As he leaves the clinic under the cover of darkness, his mind races through scenarios of deception and cover-up, planning his next steps with a chilling detachment from the young life lost and the catastrophic fallout that is sure to follow. In the dead of night, under the shroud of darkness, Richard Delaney finds himself embroiled in a grim and gruesome task. Determined to erase any link between himself and the tragic fate of Tasha Lewis, he makes the harrowing decision to dispose of her remains in a manner that he believes will leave no trace. His military training in logistics and reconnaissance misguidedly applied, Richard dismembers Tasha's body, a macabre act driven by a desperate bid to protect his own life from unraveling. He chooses several remote locations for disposal, areas he's familiar with through his military exercises where few would venture and even fewer would suspect. Each site is meticulously selected for its seclusion and the unlikely chance of discovery. With each act of disposal, Richard distances himself further from the young woman he once promised to protect, now reduced to mere evidence that needs to be concealed. The disappearance of Tasha Lewis does not go unnoticed. At first, the community and local police perceive it as a possible runaway case, common enough in small towns where the young dream of bigger horizons. However, as days turn into weeks with no word from Tasha, concern grows. Her absence at known haunts and the lingering silence on her social media feed begin to paint a more sinister picture. The police start to piece together Tasha's last known movements. Interviews with friends and acquaintances hint at her relationship with an unnamed military officer. Clues are scant and the investigation moves slowly, hindered by a lack of concrete evidence and the high regard in which Richard is held within the community. Amidst the growing anxiety, Tasha's family finds themselves grappling with frustration and grief. Her brother, Marcus Lewis, becomes a pillar of strength, channeling his anguish into action. Refusing to accept the lack of progress in the police investigation, he begins his own inquiry, piecing together Tasha's connections and the secretive nature of her recent behaviors. Marcus's suspicions inevitably lead him towards Richard Delaney. He recalls Richard's presence around Tasha and the subtle shifts in her behavior after meeting him. Determined to find the truth, Marcus starts gathering information, approaching Tasha's friends for any hint of her relationship with Richard. His resolve deepens, setting him on a collision course with uncovering the truth about what happened to his sister, driven by a profound sense of loss and the unyielding love of a brother who cannot and will not let his sister's disappearance remain unresolved. As the days stretch into weeks, the small military town, once a quiet backdrop for the mundane comings and goings of its residents, becomes a cauldron of whispered suspicions and covert glances. The mysterious disappearance of Tasha Lewis transforms from a fleeting news item into the subject of every conversation, capturing the collective imagination and fears of the community. Rumors begin to swirl, gaining momentum as the absence of any credible explanation for Tasha's disappearance feeds the town's growing appetite for gossip. Some speak in hushed tones about seeing Tasha with an older man. Others speculate about her possible escape from a future she felt trapped in. But among these whispers, a recurring theme emerges: the shadow of a high-ranking military officer, respected and decorated, yet increasingly mentioned in conjunction with Tasha's last known days. Amidst this growing storm of conjecture, Captain Richard Delaney remains outwardly unflappable. His military training equips him well to maintain a facade of composure and control. To his peers and the community, he presents himself as concerned, yet detached enough to avoid suspicion. He participates in community meetings, offers support to Tasha's family with calculated sympathy, and continues his duties with apparent dedication. He desperately wants to get back to New York, but is an engineer and does not have a choice. Behind closed doors, however, the strain begins to show as he meticulously monitors the investigation's progress, preparing to counter any move that might lead back to him. As the initial leads begin to dry up, the investigative team decides to take a more methodical approach to the case. Utilizing a combination of forensics and detailed interviews, they start to piece together the timeline of Tasha's last known days. The breakthrough comes when a diligent forensic analyst revisits the area where Tasha was last seen. The discovery of a small, overlooked item, a piece of jewelry known to belong to Tasha, found near an old, rarely used logging road, revitalizes the investigation. This clue leads the police to conduct a thorough search of the area, employing cadaver dogs and forensic teams who meticulously scour the remote locations. Their efforts unearth further evidence, grim and condemning: fragments of clothing and traces of human remains hidden amidst the underbrush, their condition making immediate identification difficult. Parallel to the forensic discoveries, the investigative team conducts extensive interviews with Tasha's friends, acquaintances, and co-workers. They build a comprehensive profile of her relationships, habits, and the subtle changes in her demeanor over the weeks leading to her disappearance. One name begins to surface repeatedly, with varying degrees of connection and speculation: Richard Delaney. Armed with this information, the investigators delve into Richard's background, unearthing his previously unblemished record and commendable service, now overshadowed by emerging inconsistencies in his alibis and movements. As the investigation intensifies, so does Richard's sense of encroachment. His once imperceptible anxiety begins to manifest in more visible signs of strain. His interactions become shorter, his temper quicker, and his usual meticulousness slips into paranoia. He starts making calls to check on the progress of the police investigation, each inquiry raising more eyebrows among his colleagues and superiors. Richard's paranoia drives him to attempt more direct interference in the investigation. He suggests alternate suspects and theories to the detectives, trying to steer them away from the mounting evidence against him. However, his suggestions come off as forced and inauthentic, arousing further suspicion. One fateful evening, under the guise of tidying up potential loose ends, Richard returns to one of the disposal sites. Unbeknownst to him, his movements are under discreet surveillance. After investigators, piecing together witness statements and surveillance footage, flagged his vehicle near the area on the night of Tasha's disappearance. As Richard attempts to recover or destroy additional evidence, police units converge on the location. Caught in the act, Richard's facade finally crumbles. The man once seen as a pillar of strength and integrity is now exposed as the architect of a horrific crime. With physical evidence linking him to the disposal sites and forensic ties to Tasha's remains, the case against him solidifies. Richard Delaney is arrested under the harsh glare of the media spotlight, his downfall a spectacle for the town and a cathartic release for those who had trusted him. The evidence is damning, and his earlier poise dissolves into desperate attempts to explain his actions. But the narrative is clear, and the community's reaction shifts from shock to anger as the true extent of his deception and brutality comes to light. In this once tranquil town, the unsettling truth about a man who embodied military honor yet harbored dark secrets forces a re-evaluation of the very values it holds dear. The investigation's meticulous piecing together of Tasha's last days not only brings justice for her tragic end, but also serves as a grim reminder of the dualities that can exist behind a well-crafted exterior. Richard Delaney's arrest marks a turning point in the case that has riveted the small military town. The news spreads like wildfire, a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction swirling through the community as they learn that the respected captain has been charged with the murder of Tasha Lewis. As the trial date approaches, the tension is palpable, with everyone bracing for the revelations that are expected to unfold in the courtroom. The trial begins under the watchful eyes of a community seeking closure and justice. The courtroom is packed each day, with local media documenting every development, broadcasting Richard's downfall from decorated soldier to accused murderer. The prosecution presents a compelling array of evidence, meticulously pieced together through forensic analysis, witness testimonies, and the damning evidence found at the disposal sites. Witnesses, including Tasha's friends and family, take the stand, painting a picture of a young woman whose life was tragically cut short. They speak of her hopes, her vulnerability, and her misplaced trust in a man who used his position to manipulate and ultimately destroy her. Experts in forensic science explain the significance of the physical evidence, linking Richard unequivocally to the crime scenes. Richard's defense team attempts to counter the overwhelming evidence with theories of misidentification and procedural errors, but the prosecution's case is robust, anchored in solid forensic evidence and reinforced by the emotional weight of the testimonies. The trial culminates in a tense, emotionally charged verdict delivery. The jury, after deliberating for hours, finds Richard Delaney guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupts in a cacophony of relief and sorrow as the verdict is read. Richard's stoic demeanor finally cracks as he is handed a life sentence without the possibility of parole. A stark end to a career that had once promised heroism and honor. The aftermath of the trial sees the town grappling with a mix of emotions. Relief that justice has been served is tinged with sorrow for the young life lost and the betrayal by a man many had admired. The case prompts a broader discussion on the responsibilities and conduct of those in power, leading to tighter regulations and oversight within the military community to prevent such abuses of power. As the town slowly begins to heal, reflections on the broader implications of the case resonate through community forums, local op-eds, and discussions within the military. The tragedy of Tasha Lewis highlights systemic issues within the military and the community, such as the often overlooked vulnerabilities of young women and the dangerous power imbalances that can exist. Leaders and citizens alike call for changes, advocating for better support systems for young people and stricter accountability measures for those in positions of authority. Educational programs are initiated to teach about consent and the abuse of power, aiming to empower others like Tasha to recognize and resist manipulation. The case of Richard Delaney and Tasha Lewis leaves an indelible mark on the community, serving as a painful yet pivotal chapter in its history. It raises uncomfortable questions about trust, authority, and justice that resonate far beyond the town's borders. The hope is that by confronting these issues head-on, similar tragedies can be prevented in the future, ensuring that justice serves not only as a punishment for the guilty, but as a deterrent and a lesson for the community at large. The trial and the definitive sentencing of Richard Delaney do not mark the end of the story, but rather pose a beginning to deeper reflections and essential dialogues within the community and beyond. This case brings to the forefront significant ethical and moral questions that challenge us to think about the very foundations of justice and responsibility. How do we as a society ensure that those in positions of power do not exploit their authority? The case of Richard Delaney illustrates a breach of trust so severe that it begs a re-evaluation of how individuals are vetted and monitored, especially in roles that involve significant influence over others. What mechanisms can be put in place to prevent those who might abuse their power from rising to positions where the potential for harm is so great? Furthermore, this tragedy compels us to confront the vulnerabilities of the young and impressionable in our midst. How can communities better protect, educate, and empower young individuals like Tasha Lewis from falling prey to manipulation? What educational tools and support systems need to be implemented to ensure that young people can recognize and resist such exploitation? Moreover, the severity of the crime prompts us to examine the adequacy of our legal and punitive systems. Is justice truly served by the conviction and sentencing of one individual? Can a system that reacts to crimes rather than preventing them be considered wholly effective? These questions challenge us to think about justice not just as a means of retribution, but as a preventative and reformative structure. The emotional and psychological impact of Tasha Lewis's untimely death on her family and the community has been profound and far-reaching. For her family, the trial and its public nature have reopened wounds that may never fully heal. They have lost a beloved daughter and sister, their grief magnified by the brutal circumstances of her demise, and the betrayal by a trusted figure. The community's journey through the investigation and trial has been a public grappling with shock, disbelief, and the eventual painful acceptance of the truth. The psychological aftermath for those who knew Tasha is complex. For some, feelings of guilt for not seeing the signs sooner. For others, anger and disillusionment towards a system that seemed to fail at protecting one of their own until it was too late. The fabric of the community has been indelibly altered, with a sense of innocence lost and a greater wariness taking its place. In the broader context, the case has sparked significant discussions on the themes of power dynamics, trust, and the protective measures necessary in military and civilian communities alike. It serves as a stark reminder of the responsibilities we all share in looking out for each other, recognizing when help is needed, and taking action before tragedies occur. As we reflect on the narrative of Richard Delaney and Tasha Lewis, we invite you, the viewers, to engage deeply with the content presented. This story, while unique in its details, brings up universal issues that touch many lives and communities. We encourage you to share your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. How does this story resonate with your understanding of justice and responsibility? What measures do you think could be effective in preventing such tragedies in your community? Moreover, we urge you to share this video to broaden the dialogue, to bring awareness to the consequences of unchecked power and the importance of community vigilance. Each share, each conversation sparked by this story contributes to a larger effort to enhance safety and justice in our societies. Let us remember Tasha Lewis not just as a victim but as a catalyst for change, a reminder of the work still needed to ensure that no other young life is cut short under similar tragic circumstances. Let this story be a call to action, a beacon guiding us towards a more just and vigilant society.